Hi, welcome to my channel Sprinkle of Resin. Here I share simple resin art processes, beginner tips and real-time projects from start to finish. Let's get into today's video. So in this video, I'll be explaining what resin is, types of resin ratios, how to measure correctly, and why getting the right ratio matters. Also, I'll be talking about some safety tips you need as a resin artist. So if you're new to resin art or you want to start, then you might want to stick to the end because this video will be very helpful to you. Let's just say that this video is introduction to resin art 101. Yes, so let's get into it. So what is resin? Resin is a two-part chemical compound made up of part A, which is the resin, and part B, which is the hardener. When you mix them correctly, they react and cure into a hard, glossy plastic-like material. And that's the magic behind all these beautiful keychains, coasters, bookmarks, jewelries you see that are made with resin. Now we know what resin is. The second thing I'll be talking about is the types of resin. There are different types of resin, but I'll be talking about the two most common ones used for crafting, which are epoxy resin and UV resin. So now let's talk about the difference between epoxy resin and UV resin. The number one difference is that epoxy resin comes in two parts, which are resin and hardener, while UV resin comes in one bottle. The second difference is that you have to mix epoxy in the right ratio, while UV resin requires no mixing. Number three difference is that epoxy takes hours to cure, usually 8 to 24 hours, while UV resin cures in seconds under a UV lamp. So for you to use a UV resin, you need a UV lamp for it. Then the last difference is that epoxy is used for bigger projects like trays, coasters, while UV resin is used for smaller projects like jewelries and keychains. The next thing I'll be talking about is the different epoxy resin ratios that we have. There is 1:1 resin ratio, there is 2:1 resin ratio, and there is 3:1 resin ratio. So this is where everything gets tricky. For me, I think that understanding resin ratio is the first thing you need to know before using resin. Because if you don't understand resin ratios, best believe that all your projects will be a waste. So to avoid wasting your resin, please make sure to know your resin ratios very well. Now, I'll be explaining ratio 1:1 and ratio 2:1. To measure your resin, you need your measuring cup or measuring scale. So, ratio 1:1 simply means that the two parts will be equal. Part A, which is the resin, and part B, which is the hardener, must be equal. The total amount you are using for each of them must be equal. If you are using 10 ml for resin, you will use 10 ml for your hardener. The two must be equal, the same amount. That's ratio 1:1. Anything you are using for your resin, you use it for your hardener, the same amount. That is it for ratio 1:1. Then in 2:1, you will measure two parts for resin and one part for hardener. That two is for resin and the one is for hardener, which means that if you are measuring 20 ml of resin, then you measure 10 ml for your hardener. That your hardener is always the half of your resin. That's why your resin is 2 and your hardener is 1. So any amount you're measuring for your resin, divide it by 2. Then one part is for your hardener. For example, if you are using 30 ml for your resin, if you divide 30 by 2, it will give you 15, which means you will use 15 for your hardener. The half of your resin is for your hardener. That is what it means. Or you can also do, if you want to measure your hardener first, then you times it by 2 to get your resin, which means if you are using maybe 10 ml for your resin, for your hardener, sorry, then you multiply 10 by 2, which is 20. Then you use 20 for your resin. Your resin is always the bigger one. So in 2:1, it means that your resin is bigger than your hardener. Now, how do you differentiate between 2:1 and 1:1? In 1:1, the two bottles are always equal. The two bottles, the part A and part B, are equal. While in 2:1, the resin is bigger than the hardener. So this is how you know which one is 1:1 and 2:1. Now, why does the ratio matters? If you don't measure based on the ratio you are using, one is that your resin may not cure properly. Number two is that if the resin is too much, it stays soft, it will not cure. Then if your hardener is too much, it stays sticky, it will still not cure. So that is why you need to measure according to the ratio you are using, and measure accurately, because that is the secret to achieving a perfect result every time. So let me say it again. In ratio 1:1, the resin and hardener must be of equal quantity. Then in ratio 2:1, the resin will be bigger than the hardener. And that is it for the resin ratios and how to measure your resin. Now, I'll be talking about some steps and processes you need to follow to achieve a great working experience with resin. Number one. Number one is to protect yourself. Yes, always make sure to protect yourself, because your personal safety is important in resin. And I can't even stress it enough. Always wear your gloves and your masks. Always, whenever you're working with resin, endeavor to wear your gloves and your masks, because resin is a chemical and it can also react to your body. Number two is ventilation. Always make sure to work in a place that is well ventilated. Please, because sometimes resin can have this strong smell that that can even choke you. So you have to make sure that whenever you are working with resin, that the place is well ventilated. Open all windows. If possible, use fan too. But just make sure that that place is well ventilated. It is for your own safety. Number three is to protect your space, because resin can be messy. So before using your resin, make sure to remove every unwanted materials from your workspace. Yes, because once resin sticks to it, it will be very hard to come off. Number four is to prepare your molds and materials before mixing your resin. While you working with resin, you need to prepare all your working materials before measuring out your resin, because once you measure out your resin, your time starts counting. So you want to make sure that all your materials are ready and also close to you, so you don't have to waste time running around to get your materials. Because if you waste time with resin, it will cure inside your mixing cup. Like you will still be mixing, and your resin will just get hard inside that cup. So you just have to get everything ready before measuring out your resin to avoid wasting your materials. Number five is measure your resin accurately. I think like 80% success of your full resin work is totally dependent on this. Yes, and maybe the other 20 depends on how you mix and every other thing. It is really important that you measure your resin and hardener accurately so that it cures properly. The ratio you use will always be written on the bottle so that you know the particular ratio you are using and how to measure it. Remember that we have ratio 2:1, 1:1, and 3:1. Always measure according to the one you are using. Number 6 is to follow the mixing instructions. This is also another aspect that is very, very important. When you buy your chemicals, sometimes the manufacturers might write the amount of time you need to mix your resin before using it. But if you buy and there is no instructions on it, just make sure to mix for 3 to 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes. Yes. The next one is room temperature. When it comes to resin, the temperature is important too. Yes. When your environment is too hot, your resin cures too fast. And if your environment is too cold, your resin takes longer time to cure. But when the temperature is right, it will behave the exact way it's supposed to. The next one is to use a dust cover. Always cover your project after pouring to avoid having tiny particles or dust on your work when it's fully cured. So always make use of dust cover. Then the last one is to be patient. Yes, it's hard, especially as a beginner. You just want to know if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. But you just have to be patient with your resin. Or if you know that you want to be touching it all the time, checking if it's cured or not, you can just do a small one separate from your main project that you can just be using to check how it's going. And that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more satisfying resin tutorials every week. Thank you for watching Sprinkle of Resin. I will see you in the next one.